order and ask for any public comment on any item not currently listed on the agenda. Anyone want to speak? Okay, good. Seeing none, then. Sorry. Seeing none, we'll move forward to adoption of Planning Commission meeting minutes for March 22nd, 2010. Everybody had an opportunity to read that, I hope. And are there any questions, changes, or additions? No? No? Good. Do we have a motion to accept those?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to accept those meeting minutes, and an excellent job on those, by the way. I thought they were very well done.
Thanks.
Laura, you can call roll.
Commissioner Stein?
Sure.
A.
Aye.
Commissioner Lefroy?
Aye.
Commissioner Kidwell?
Aye.
Chair Powell?
Aye.
All right. Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move into our first hearing. This is CU 10-01 and SP 10-01. At this time, I'll read our legal information. A staff report has been prepared for the application and has been made available 7 days prior to this evening's hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to the applicant's proposal. If anyone would like us to read those criteria, please let me know. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report, along with any written comments and input that have been received through the public notification process for the application. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure the Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code, and the hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart to my right. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a slip and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. All letters, reports, or pictures must be marked as an exhibit by the planning staff before they can be submitted into the record. For the public record, please begin all testimony by stating your name and city of residence. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply, in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain why you believe they apply to the application under consideration this evening. A person does not have to testify in order to submit written materials of any length while the public record is open on each application. However, any party wishing for a continuance or to keep the record open must make that request before the public hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue which you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the Commission's consideration. Without raising an issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence so that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be adjudged appealable in the State Land Use Court of Appeals. In addition, Oregon Revised Statutes 197-796 requires us to announce the following. The failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damage in circuit court. At this time, I'll ask if any commissioners have any ex parte contact, conflict of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare.
I've visited the site.
Yes, I too have visited the site and was just down the street. I visited the site.
Okay. I would like to mention that I live just a block away, or less than a block away, a house away from the site. A couple years ago, I was the neighborhood chair for the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and this application was initially brought forward to our land use chair, and we had an open meeting, and we discussed we had a preliminary discussion on the application. I was in attendance at that meeting. I did not make comment, I just listened. Since then, this application has grown wings and changed into a totally different package than it was when I first saw it. So I feel I'm very comfortable in making a decision on this application, and I don't feel I'm biased at this point at all. So I wanted to put that out there. Anybody who would like to question me or any of the other commissioners on our statements? Okay, very good. Thank you very much. At this time, then, we'll turn it over for staff report. Pete.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair Powell and Commissioners. Tonight's application for review by the Planning Commission is a conditional use, planning file 10-01, and site plan and design review application 10-01. And the applicant is Carlton Hart Architecture, Paul Falsetto is the representative for Atkinson Memorial Church. The parcel is located at 710 6th Street and 718 6th Street in Oregon City. I'm putting up the PowerPoint which shows the project site. The applicant seeking approval for conditional use and site plan and design review for a religious institution, and specifically they're expanding. They are expanding their site to include a new education building, including classrooms and the preschool. As part of this application, they're requesting conditional use approval for temporary use of the parsonage building on the site located at 517 I believe Jefferson, and all of this site has been consolidated, I believe, under one tax lot right now. And the parsonage would be used temporarily to house the preschool at 716 6th Street until the new building is constructed. Just to give you an update on the status of the other review that is applicable to this site, the applicant has applied separately for Historic Review Board approval for the new addition and to demolish the parsonage. The parsonage is a non-designated structure in the McLaughlin Historic District, and they've currently gone through the process of approval for the demolition and are following up with the subsequent conditions of approval that apply to the demolition of the preschool at that site, which include making an effort to have the building moved, and then subsequent to the Planning Commission's decision, they will apply for a demolition permit for that building, having had it approved by the Historic Review Board. That demolition application is not up for appeal at the moment. The new building was reviewed separately as a file by the Historic Review Board, and the Historic Review Board approved that application, and it was subsequently appealed to the City Commission, which heard the appellant's argument and remanded the Historic Review Board decision back to the Historic Review Board for a hearing tomorrow night to review specifically the compatibility of the materials on the building for compatibility with the McLaughlin Historic District.
So that was the only criteria? That
was the only criteria. The specific design criteria was 1740-060E6, which is the Historic Overlay District, which is not the substance of this application tonight. So this is a relatively flat site. It is surrounded on all sides by a complete street with sidewalk, curb, and gutter. Zoning on the property is Mixed-Use Corridor 1, which is a mixed-use commercial district, and it allows a variety of uses, including retail, office, institutional, various other things. The dimensional standards of the mixed-use corridor zone allow for a building to be built to the property lines. And in this case, the Historic Review Board granted an exception to that regulation for the new building when they reviewed it, so that it would meet similar setbacks as the Atkinson Memorial Church. The Atkinson Memorial Church, which is the designated landmark in this site and on the block, is a Gothic-style architecture church which has been in the city since, I believe, the 1920s. The Historic Review Board reviewed the addition for compatibility with both that new structure and also for its compatibility with adjacent structures. And if you look adjacent to this building, you've got the Carnegie Center to the north, which is owned institutional. You have various historic homes, specifically the Ermatinger House, the Stevens Crawford Museum, and the Zumwalt House. You also have the Pioneer Center to the west, which is owned institutional. There's a city-owned parking lot to the southwest. And you do have a scattering of the existing residential buildings in this district adjacent to the site. So what the applicant has attempted to do with this design is to blend the massing and the materials and the scale of the building to not only not detract from the Atkinson Memorial Church, but also to blend in with adjacent residential zoning. So the materials on the structure include brick, they include lath siding, and the use of hardy panel. Originally, the hardy panel was proposed for more of the where you now see 4-inch lath siding in your application. That was originally proposed to be a cement board siding, and has subsequently been revised to the 4-inch lath siding to be more compatible with adjacent residential buildings and with the district itself. So the applicant has applied for Historic Review Board approval. That's going back to the Historic Review Board tomorrow night on remand. Planning Commission is here to review the conditional use and site plan and design review. And so that means the applicant must show that the church has accounted for the impacts of the expansion to the neighborhood, and that the expansion complies with the city's codes for new development, which include landscaping, parking, street trees, various other things, including the architecture and massing of the building. The conditional use criteria are as follows, and there have been detailed responses to the conditional use criteria in your report under starting on page 4 of 27 of the staff report. There are responses and findings to Chapter 1756, which is conditional use. The first criterion is that the use be listed as a conditional use in the underlying zone district. Staff's finding is this is complies pursuant to OCG 1729-030G. Religious uses are a conditional use in the mixed-use corridor zone district. Second requirement is that the characteristics of the site be suitable for the proposed use, considering size, shape, location, topography, existence of improvements, and natural features. Proposed location of the new building will be on the same location that has been used by the Atkinson Memorial Church for a preschool. The block surrounding the site is already developed with a complete street system. The site is essentially flat. The site is adjacent to the Atkinson Memorial Church, the 7th Street Commercial Corridor, Carnegie Library Park, Richard Bloom Tots Park, Pioneer Community Center, and several historic residential buildings. There are also a short 4-block walk to the municipal elevator and the McLaughlin Promenade. Proposed demolition plan on applicant sheet D1.1 indicates the removal of 5 existing trees on the site that require removal to make space for the proposed parking lot, structure, interior courtyard, and new lawn. And based on this review, we found the characteristics of the site to be suitable for the proposed use. Third criterion is that the site and proposed developments be timely, considering the adequacy of the transportation system, public facilities and services existing or planned for the area affected by the use. The applicant had provided a traffic analysis letter, and that was prepared by Charbonneau Engineering. The applicant is proposing that there is no change to the existing use of the site, and the expansion of the building does not include an expansion to the concurrent number of participants on the site. So during the weekday, the applicant stated that they experienced about 32 vehicles on average visiting the site. And then on their biggest day, which is close to Sunday, there would be a slight increase from 95 vehicles to 102 vehicles with the new building. In essence, the applicant stated there will be no significant changes in the related traffic conditions generated by the facility. That report and the traffic loading addendum that is in your packet, which documents the number of units or vehicles visiting the site, was reviewed by John Recklinger of Recklinger and Associates. Recklinger's initial concern was that the applicant might be tempted to gradually expand use of the facility. However, upon further review of the application, Mr. Recklinger concluded that the traffic analysis letter provides an adequate basis on which to evaluate the impact, and he does not recommend any mitigation. The applicant's letter shows that it will have minimal impact on the transportation system as long as the facility operates during weekdays as it does currently, which is a preschool with 32 participants. And neither mitigation nor further additional analysis is needed. Should the Planning Commission require that the applicant agree to some sort of limit for the new building in the event that more than 32 participants attend midweek, then the applicant would need to come back either to Planning Commission or to the Community Development Director and show a traffic analysis in that event. And we would also request that they provide a yearly report to the Community Development Director documenting how the facility is being used and whether any additional analysis on traffic and parking is necessary. With respect to parking, we'll go into that briefly when I go through the site plan and design review criteria. The applicants proposed 2 new additional parking spaces in the courtyard area to serve the expansion building of the building, which is approximately 1,750 square feet of usable space. So 2 spaces meets the minimum requirement for parking for the new building. The existing church uses the existing off-street parking on the adjacent parking lot, which is city-owned, as well as adjacent on-street parking on the block. Applicants provided detailed responses to criteria number 4. The proposed use will not alter the character of the surrounding area in a manner which substantially limits, impairs, or precludes the use of surrounding properties for the primary uses in the underlying district. So, as you can see from the zoning map, the area is zoned to allow for a variety of mixed residential, institutional, and commercial uses. Proposed use will be much the same as it was previously. The setbacks that are proposed for the new expansion are similar to adjacent residential properties and the Atkinson Memorial Church. And no changes are proposed to vehicular access and egress to the site. There's currently an alleyway between the parsonage and the proposed new building, which will continue to be there, although, and that will provide the primary access to the 2 ADA parking spots in the back. So in summary, the proposed use will not substantially limit, impair, or preclude the use of surrounding properties for the primary uses listed in the underlying district. The 5th criteria is that the proposal satisfies the goals and policies of the City Comprehensive Plan, which apply to the proposed use. And on pages 7 through 9 of the staff report, you will find documentation of how the application responds to the various applicable comprehensive plan criteria. I'll briefly go into the site plan and design review application. So what's being proposed here is a new building of approximately 1,600 square feet of footprint, single story. There is a mezzanine and stairwell with a basement in the elevated portion of the building, which would be built adjacent to the Atkinson Memorial Church. The proposed materials for the new building are, as I said earlier, 4-inch lap siding, 6-inch lap siding, brick directly adjacent to the breezeway in the transition zone, and then the breezeway itself, for various design reasons, is designed to be very small, so as to create the smallest possible connection to the Atkinson Memorial Church, and not to detract from the scale and architecture of the landmark building. The applicants propose to continue the use of cement board on the breezeway to create a similar material finish to the parched coating on the Atkinson Memorial Church. With respect to the architecture of the front and sides of the building, you'll notice that the windows follow historic proportions of the district, so that there's some rhythm with the existing Atkinson Memorial Church. The new addition is clearly smaller than the historic church, and at the Jefferson Street level is compatible in size with the adjacent parsonage. This is a slide from the original Historic Review Board application, which I thought would be useful for tonight. It states what type of architecture is envisioned for the McLaughlin MEC1 commercial district, and here are a few existing buildings in the McLaughlin district, which provides some basis for comparison against the proposal. You'll see the use of stucco, you'll see the use of brick, you'll see the use of lap siding, and various other materials, all within a two-story context. And most of the buildings shown in this slide are all built right to the property line and are commercial in nature. This is an institutional building, but it has been reviewed against the commercial and institutional design standards, so that we show compatibility with those in 1762 as well. So with respect to Chapter 1762 Site Plan and Design Review, we found that it has met all of the criteria for approval with 1762. With respect to parking, which is Chapter 1752, at the Planning Commission's discretion, we have included a condition of approval, which is condition of approval 1. And I'd be happy to go into more detail about that if you want. So if there is any expansion in the future, that it would either come back to the Planning Commission or to through the minor site plan process, which is a typical process used for modification of a conditional use, to document any subsequent analysis that needs to be done and any mitigation for parking and traffic that could be done, that needs to be done in order to account for that. Most of the conditions of approval that I've attached to the application with respect to landscaping and street trees are fairly minor. They include bicycle parking. Applicant proposed bicycle parking space in the public right-of-way, which is public right-of-way and requires Public Works Department approval if it is to remain there. I don't think it's a bad location at all, considering where it is in respect to the site access to the building. However, if the Public Works Department does not want that there, then the applicant will have to provide an alternative location for the bike parking that meets city code. Recommended the applicant prepare a revised tree planting plan for all trees to be planted on the site, including public street trees, which will be planted behind the sidewalk along 6th Street. The applicant has proposed to plant street trees behind the sidewalk along 6th Street because the planter strip width there is fairly limited, and I agree that that's a good idea as long as there's a covenant placed on those trees that recognizes they're public street trees, and they will give the city the right to replace them if the applicant does not maintain them and replace them in the event that they are diseased, dying, or hazardous. But that would allow for some space to plant a fairly good-sized tree as opposed to a tree from a street tree list, which would only be a 2 to 3 foot plant of strip width. Recommending that the transformer pad be screened pursuant to our mechanical equipment screening requirements to the extent practicable. Requesting further information regarding reflectivity of the proposed window glass, and a final photometric plan demonstrating that there will not be off-site light impacts greater than a half-a-foot candle, which is what our code requires. We've got some good specifications for the lights on the site, and they're all full cutoff design and downcast, but we don't have one photometric for the site that shows that the property line lighting levels have been met. Finally, we have a couple of engineering standard policy compliance conditions of approval, and which are follow the construction guidelines for the engineering department and coordinate with the public works division to determine whether the existing catch basins can still be used with 2 new ADA ramps that are recommended because of their location. That's the minor. I want to give you a brief overview of where we are with respect to the 120-day decision deadline. The Historic Review Board file 120-day deadline is June 2nd, 2010. If that decision is appealed again within 10 days of tomorrow night, should the HRB approve it, the appeal date before the City Commission would be July 7th, 2010. The applicant is in control of the 120-day process, and it is up to them whether they can extend that 120 days. With respect to how that affects this application, the 120-day decision deadline for conditional use 1001 and SP 1001 is August 21st. If there's further HRB appeal of HR 1001, the next Planning Commission hearing date to continue to following July 7th would be July 12th. If there is no further Historic Review Board appeal, the next PC hearing to continue to would be June 14th, 2010. And separately, the Planning Commission's decision on this conditional use and site plan design review application may be appealed separately as well. We're recommending approval of this application with the conditions that are in your staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any more questions you have if I hadn't covered everything. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Any questions of staff at this point?
I have just one question, and I think it might go back to your 120-day rule comments, but I was just curious as to why we didn't send this to the Historic Review Board prior to the first Planning Commission hearing.
Can you repeat the question?
So the Historic Review Board is going to
I see. The remand.
Have a remand hearing subsequent to the first Planning Commission hearing of this CU 1001 and SP 1001.
Primarily, it was an issue of trying to provide some timeliness to review the application, and we did create a little bit of a confusion there with that decision, but the City Commission wanted to send this back as soon as we could, and we had mentioned a date certain at the remand hearing, I believe. So that's what we set the date for. Yeah. At the appeal hearing, the City Commission set a date certain.
Yeah, and that remand was specific to the material. That's why I brought it up earlier. Okay. I'm sorry, you have questions? I have a couple of questions. You mentioned 32 participants using the new building during the week. Now, is actually the new building, or is that the school participants?
That's the preschool use.
The preschool use.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they bring in 10 more preschoolers, I'm not. I guess I want to think about that as about requiring another transportation plan. I know that kids are growing up faster, but they're not driving a preschool yet. I know that. So it may not, it may just be a stop and drop type thing, and that's something we can look at, but I don't know that it's going to be a traffic impact. Just something to think about. The other thing, moving the parsonage over, and if that temporary use is for a preschool, I'm a little concerned about alley access, and I would think we want to consider possibly fencing that. Making sure that there's a fence on that alleyway for safety. And the other question I have is, will there be, currently there's not a lot of traffic on that alley. It's not an approved alley, and there's not a lot of traffic on that alley, but if that's going to be a major access to the parking facility, I'm wondering if there's something we need to consider about protecting the traffic on Jefferson Street and pulling out onto those sidewalks. So some sort of signage or something to protect pedestrian traffic, which there's quite a bit of around that neighborhood. That's something to think about as we go through this, I think.
Okay.
And I think you answered my question about lighting. It wasn't clear, and so you had your question. Your answer was it wasn't clear to you guys yet at this point either. So
yeah, we have photometric cut sheets for the individual fixtures, but we don't have a full photometric plan for the site.
For the overall site, and that's a concern considering its position, in the neighborhood. So I'd like to make sure we see that as well. Okay.
I just need to pull up the site plan here, so I have it on the screen for everyone.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Okay, Commissioner LeJoie.
Yeah, I got two questions, just about just procedurally here. So the request, let's see, it's supposed to be 5 feet from the setback, and we're going to be moving it 8.5 feet back. So that's requesting a variance. Is that variance? Can HRB rule on the variance then? Is that what I'm saying?
We did grant what's called a historic preservation incentive, which is an HRB variance for that, and I believe that they can rule on that, and they did rule on that.
Okay, so that's not in our jurisdiction.
I don't believe so. I think it's a Type 3 quasi-judicial decision that's already made by the HRB, and they can grant that by themselves. And
yeah, so they can do variances essentially.
For specific historic review board goals.
Okay.
And the reason they did that was to match the contextual setback with the Atkinson Church.
Sure.
And provide more residential flow.
Okay. And the other one I have about variances, and it requires 60% glass. Is that right on the facade?
Correct.
And I never read in here if they met it or not. Do they or do they not?
Do not meet the 60% glass.
So do they require a variance?
On that one, they talked about matching the rhythm and fenestration of the Atkinson Memorial Church, but they didn't specifically grant a historic review board incentive for it. So it was not addressed at the HRB level.
It's one of our criteria.
Right? It is one of our site plan design review criteria. Right. And we did not make a variance finding for that.
Okay. So, and then I have one other question. I'd just like you to give me, just for everybody here, for everybody watching, I guess stand back for a minute. When something's put on the historic register, and now you put an addition to it, what does the historic register like to see? Exact duplicates, 180 degrees difference, or what? How does it?
Record.
What's the intent?
Record will show various points of view on this, but I think the overwhelming point of view, and that there's a letter in the Historic Review Board, a record from SHPO, which is State Historic Preservation Office. It talks about the design needs to be sensitive to the landmark, not detract from it, and not try to imitate it. So designs that are similar in scale and massing, but use more modern materials, may end up being a cheap knockoff of the landmark itself, unless they're absolutely identical. But they also state that massing is very important, because if you suddenly double the size of the landmark by trying to make it identical, you're no longer respecting the landmark. So there's a balance between using compatible materials and remaining contextually sensitive to that. So there's nothing wrong with adding a modern building onto an old historic building, as long as it's not overwhelming the massing of that, and it uses architectural aspects such as rhythm, setbacks, contextual materials that may not be on the building itself but are found elsewhere in the vicinity. The HRB's, I think it was Preservation Brief 14 from the Secretary of Interior, was one of the items in the record that talks about that in more detail. And I would ask Paul Falzetta, the architect, to talk about that in much more detail. Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else?
I have one question with regard to policy 5.3.1. They encourage architectural design of new structures in historic districts and the central downtown area to be compatible with the historic character of the surrounding area. And I was curious how that was evaluated. I read that to be more than just how it relates to the existing historic church. It appears to be more a question of how it relates to the historic character of the surrounding area.
You're quite right. The finding on page 7 regarding policy 5.3.1 only talks about the historic church. But with respect to the compatibility with historic character of the surrounding area, elsewhere in the staff report, we talk about the use of lap siding, we talk about the use of brick on the Carnegie Center, and those sorts of things are found on buildings that are within the adjacent area that are part of the historic district, and I believe that was supportive of that policy as well.
I'm just curious, aside from the issue of material that's used on the building, is there any consideration to the form of the building itself?
The applicant addressed that when they talk about the use of articulation in the building, and particularly where the location of the new entrance is, where it comes in off of 6th Street. The stairs that they have there matching in width and approximate spacing along the block, as well as the I guess I would call those where the 4-inch lap siding is proposed, the spacing of those offsets is in character with the Atkinson Memorial Church, and they talk about that in some detail in their application. And as you move around onto Jefferson Street, you've got a much more residential feel over there. So they've proposed an entryway on Jefferson Street, which has more wood components and those sorts of things. What's tying it all together is the cornice and outside bands that follow all the way around to the existing church, so that there's some continuity there. And I believe that they've met that policy.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, then at this time, we appreciate that, Pete. And at this time, we'll call for the applicant's presentation.
I'd like to enter into the record that PowerPoint is Exhibit 1 and comments submitted from the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association after the completion of the staff report is Exhibit 2.
That's correct.
Is there a single motion or part of this?
We've got comments from the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association there.
Which is a 1, 2, 3-page document.
That's correct. This PowerPoint will be entered into the record as Exhibit 1.
Thank you.
Double click.
Oh, yes. Move it over.
You can enter the applicant's middle as Exhibit 3.
My name is Paul Falsetto, and I work for Carlton Hart Architecture, and I'm the applicant for this project. Our office is 322 Northwest 8th Avenue in Portland.
Dean DeSantis. I live in Oregon City, and I'm also a member of Atkinson Memorial Church, a member of the building committee, and also I'm the owner of DeSantis Landscapes, who've done the landscape plan. So, any questions about the landscape, I can help you out with.
I'm going to spend some time. I prepared an Adobe Acrobat presentation, and you have kind of a synopsis of that. But you've asked good questions. We're happy to provide answers, and at least the direction of our design and what it's based on. And I know that this is a little bit cut off on the screen above, but what we're showing here in this bird's eye view is the church, and I'm going to start with the church, and I think I have an arrow right here. As Pete mentioned, the church is historic. It was built in 1925. It's listed individually in the National Register of Historic Places. It's been used as a church since its inception, and the current user, the Unitarian Universalist congregation, has been in there for 48 years now, since 1961. So they are one of the longer tenured entities in this neighborhood. Next to it is a building that the church owns. I call it the 718 building. That's its address, and it's the home of Oregon City Preschool. And they've been at this site almost as long. They've been there 40 plus years operating out of that building. The building itself was built in 1925, and as Pete mentioned, it's a non-contributing building to the district. And just south of it is the parsonage. That building will remain, and it was built in 1930. It's also non-contributing to the district. The church owns it and has used it in a variety of ways, most recently as a residence, and they are proposing a conditional use, a change of use for that, for religious purposes, and that will be the home of the preschool while construction goes on. The church is very, they would like to be able to move the 718 building if possible. They've talked to a number of entities, so it's available for that. If that doesn't happen, then there's a series of mitigating actions, which includes salvaging materials to be used on other buildings, salvaging materials to keep them out of the landfill, recycling as much as possible if this building needs to be deconstructed on site. The use, I'm going to keep this slide up for just a moment. The church right now has a variety of their Sunday school meetings in the basement of the church and a variety of corners of spaces in the church that are non-satisfactory to the teaching staff and to the students. And so they've long since dreamed to have a space for that. They've accommodated Oregon City Preschool, as I mentioned, for a number of decades, and it was felt that better accommodations for that entity would be a plus to the neighborhood. And we're talking about a new building that's accessible, so kids that need that sort of accessibility can attend Oregon City Preschool. A building that's safe, a building that is sprinkled and brought up to the latest seismic codes. And so that use will remain. They'll rent out a couple rooms. There's no intent or desire to enlarge the program at all. And that's what we're moving forward with this program.
I'd like to add, Paul, is that while the religious education space is important for the church, the other main goal of this addition is accessibility. ADA requirements weren't present in 1920 when they built the building. We've got a lot of older members who can't now come to church on Sunday, so our new addition has an elevator that will allow that accessibility.
I know this is a little bit cut off on the screen, but Pete asked for further analysis, and your traffic engineer asked for that as well. So the client went back, the owner went back and talked with Oregon City Preschool and found out what their uses were, predicted changes with the new building. Right down the line, it predicted that there'd be no change in additional people using the space. And then they actually created a very detailed monthly schedule. In this case, it was March 2010. I'm just showing just a little bit of it here. So they met, I think, with great veracity the desire to understand if there was going to be any additional use. And they said we might pick up a few more parishioners, a few more folk attending because they can now if they have a wheelchair. The sacristy is now accessible. So that's their intent. I want to talk a little bit about the MUC district. It is a mixed-use commercial, and what's interesting is right here is where we're located, at the 18 site. We're surrounded, actually, by institutional uses. We've got the Carnegie Center across the street. We've got the Topps Park across Jefferson. Kitty Corner is the Ermatinger House, and, of course, the Pioneer Community Center. So there are residences in the neighborhood, but in the immediate vicinity, it's an institutional use. And even Kitty Corner, even though there are historic houses there, those are part of the MUC1 zoning as well. And that MUC1 allows and encourages buildings to be taller, up to 45 feet in height, to be right on the property line. And the church didn't want to do either one. They wanted a modest building. They wanted a building they could afford and that they could maintain and that would fit the neighborhood. And so instead of that 45-foot height, we're at about 22 feet 7 inches. We're about half that height, and that's as tall as we needed to be just to allow access to the main floor of the church building itself. And we've also asked that variance for the front yard setback, and I'll show you some 3D images of why we asked for that. So I'm going to kind of run through a series of decisions we made using the site plan as annotation for that. We've got a landmark on the site. This is an individually nominated building to the National Register of Historic Places, and so that's a very high destination. It's one of the highest that you can afford a building, and we're mindful of that. On the design side, the church is mindful of that as tenants, owners of that building, and so it was important for us to make sure that our building set back and did not stand proud of the church, and this is one of the major entries into the church. We wanted to make sure that our building was set back from that, but also had its entry point too, kind of reflecting that entry, that pedestrian experience off of 6th Street sidewalk. We also wanted to set the building back on what I'm calling Plan South of the site because we've got a very large Poli stained glass window here that's extraordinarily valuable. And we wanted to maintain daylight to the window and as much as possible maintain views from the outside, from the surrounding neighborhood, back to the outside of that window. So we've narrowed down our building here, and we call that the transition zone because it transitions from the historic church to our classroom wing. And it's also where you enter at 2 points. You have stairs up and stairs down, and that very key, very important elevator. You can see the other entry point is off of Jefferson. We wanted to make sure that we were activating that side of the street as well. The city municipal code requires articulation along a long extended elevation. We have a long elevation. We have a 106-foot elevation. So lots of the ins and outs that you see here are based on the requirement from the code. And we continued around to Jefferson Street as well. It was important to accommodate parking. It was important to have clear pathways through the site, and it was actually required, and the church agreed absolutely, to bring up to pedestrian and bike standards and ADA standards the adjacent sidewalk. So one of the first things we're required to do on this intersection of 6th Street and Jefferson is to upgrade the ADA ramps, and we'll do it on this end of the block as well. What you're seeing here is the 2 ADA parking spots. We talked long and hard about maybe putting them on the street, but it would have required a longer journey, basically, to get from the car to inside the building than if we just pulled it on site. And pulling it on site allows not only for easier access, but it takes 2 less parking spots off the street as well. We're accommodating those on site. We have, as Pete mentioned, the bicycle rack. It seemed like a great location right out here, right near the front entry point. And there's also sidewalk repair that needs to occur along this area, and that will take place. Plus, we have a curb cut for the existing garage that'll be filled in as well. You can see other pathways through the site. This is the pathway from the alleyway into the south entry into the transition zone. Garbage is being handled in this area here, fenced off, and easy access to Jefferson Street. Three trees. 5 trees will come down. 3 birch trees at the alleyway where our ADA parking needs to be. There's a tree right in this end of the site that we'd love to keep if we can, but we're planning that we can't, unfortunately. And then there's a holly tree that we took down. So here's our 5 mitigation trees here. We've added 4 street trees along Jefferson. It has wide enough parking strip to accommodate it. This is a very narrow strip with heavy power lines above. And so in discussion and deliberation with staff, it was decided that it was best for everyone to pull those trees onto the site, allow them to mask the building, to soften that experience between the street and building. So these 3 trees here are those 3 trees that Pete mentioned. And we have plenty of other trees as well, and plenty of other plantings as well. So you can begin to see Dean's planting program here. We've got a lot of shrubs and ground cover. And I want to mention a couple more utility elements that we have to accommodate. One is stormwater. As you know, there's a high water table. The church has experienced leaking in the past, and we want to make sure that we're not going to harm that at all. Matter of fact, correct a lot of those issues on site. And so what we have here is the water quality garden. This is the first stop for all site water. Let the plants begin to clean it and to actually meter it out. It goes over here to the retention vault and then right into the city system after that. So all the site is draining in that manner. We also have a pad-mounted transformer over here in this location. This was quite a challenge for us because right here is where our electrical room is, that's our mechanical room, and right out here is where the main power is coming from. And we wanted initially to have a pole mounted, but that pole is overloaded already. And so we were forced to do a pad mounted. And because of the necessary clearances and accessibility by PGE to get to this transformer, there was no other place to really put it. And so there it sits on the site. We will screen it as best as we can. We have a couple of other elements. We've got double check valves here and here for the fire system, fire suppression system, and the water system. Let's see, is there anything? Actually, Dean, I'll go to this one, and that's your landscape plan. If you want to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, a couple of points. The street trees over on Jefferson, those are from the Oregon City Street Tree List. There's scarlet oaks that get about 25 to 30 feet in height when they're fully mature. Then along the Jefferson entrance, you've got some Chamaecyparis that are more columnar conifers that will kind of be your soldiers right at the welcoming committee there on Jefferson Street. Across the 6th Street front, you've got pretty lower trees. The HM is a witch hazel, which might get 8 feet in height when it's fully mature. And then the symbol AS are the Apollo columnar maples, much more columnar trees, so again getting that softening effect of the building that Paul mentioned, but stays very columnar in its growth habit. And the rest is all lower growing shrubs and ground covers throughout the landscape.
And we noticed out here in the parking lot that the City Hall does have a stormwater garden system, and we wanted to show an image for folks that might not know what that looks like, but
ours would look very similar to the one you have out in front here.
So Pete showed this image. I'm going to show it again to offer a level of explanation. This is our breezeway. This is the most minimal connection we can make between our new building and the historic building. I'll explain why that's important in a minute. Here's our transition zone here, transitioning both aesthetically and physically as you move between the church and the education wing or the classroom wing over here. One of the issues that was mentioned by staff was the HVAC units on the roof. We had originally intended to house them in these little niches, but as we were progressing our drawings, we realized that as the wall was built first and the roof came on, that we couldn't guarantee that those units would be hidden. So we decided to solve the problem. Let's lump them at the center of the building, and once they're done, we'll build the wall to appropriate screening height. It was mentioned what regulatory agencies have review and what is their philosophy. So I thought I'd talk about the three entities that we have to address when we do this sort of work. I mentioned that the church is a listed building in the National Register, and as such, work to it, on it, around it, adding to it needs to pertain to the Secretary of Interior standards. And there's 10 standards that are presented. They tend to be general guidelines and direction, and the laws, the information that back those up are presented in preservation briefs. And I think there are up to 40 or 50 of those. Pete mentioned that Preservation Brief 14 is the one that's most applicable here. It's titled New Exterior Additions to Historic Buildings. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read some of the direction that's provided because I think it answers Dan's question. So, stated within Preservation Brief 14, it says, a particularly successful method to reduce damage is to link the new addition to the historic block by means of a hyphen or a connector, and that would be Arbery's way. It also states that rather than establishing a clear and obvious difference between old and new, it might seem more in keeping with the historic character simply to repeat the historic form, materials, features, and detailing in the new addition. But they emphasize, but when the new work is indistinguishable from the old in appearance, then the real National Register property may no longer be perceptible or perceived and appreciated by the public. So we tend to think of these buildings as artifacts in a way, and if you're adding on to it, you do not want to confuse anybody. And they might not be confused in the first 5 or 10 years, but we look out at the last in 50 years or 100 years. We want to make sure that the casual passerby does not mistake our addition for the original landmark. It mentions also if this sort of work happens on a visible elevation, which our 6th Street elevation is very visible, it becomes unclear as to which features are historic and which are new, thus confusing the authenticity of the historic resource itself. And so that's the direction we get from the federal government through Preservation Brief 14. Now, the entity that's charged with making sure that this gets done proper is the State Historic Preservation Office. It's not the National Park Service, it's the state. And so SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, is charged to review any work done with National Register properties, which they did, and Joyce Sears is the restoration specialist. And in February of this year, she stated in her letter, her findings, that the new addition is simple and compatible design with the church. Features that make it especially compatible is the 1-story in height with limited connection through the half-story height of breezeway. The relatively long facade along 6th Street is broken up into discernible groupings that is made cohesive in color and materials chosen. She goes on to say that the education addition to the Atkinson Memorial Church meets the Secretary of Interior standards and favorable approval is recommended. But we don't stop there. We have to address city standards, many of which you know, many of which Pete has talked about. Not only the municipal code, but the neighborhood association, which we have met with. And the wonderful document that was prepared by the city called Guidelines for New Construction, which became basically our Bible for this sort of local work. And if you would allow me, I want to read a few things from that because it gives very clear direction. So, general design principles, it states, these principles shall guide new construction to be compatible with existing historic resources and yet offer strategies that can incorporate new materials and products. New construction is just that. It is not historic, nor shall it attempt to be historic, but rather to stand side by side with existing historic structures in a respectful manner. And that really is our definition of compatible, stand side by side in a respectful manner. The guidelines were written really to address two types of development, residential development and commercial development, and we're kind of neither. We're institutional development. And so they wanted actually the designer to pick an acceptable style and kind of stay with that style. Since there's not an appropriate style for us, we kind of chose the option, as it says here, that The appropriate style and form of the new building depends upon the site and neighboring or transitioning context. So we felt that we had a little bit of leeway, but a lot more responsibility to pick an appropriate look for the building based on this transition neighborhood. So here's our site. This is right across my back to the Carnegie Center. We've got the 518 building in the center here, which is slated to be removed. We've got the church to the right, and we've got a very long site. Directly across the street, if you were standing at the entryway to the 518 building and look back, you'd see the park and the Carnegie in the distance. Directly across the other way, looking across Jefferson Street, is the Tots Park. So we looked at the context, we looked at the neighborhood, and this is a very interesting and actually quite wonderful neighborhood. So here's our building, here's the church here, 1925. You've got the newer Pioneer Community Center, institutional use. You've got the Ermatinger House here, institutional zoned. You've got the Carnegie Center, of course. Kitty corner, we have the Zumwalt House. We've got the Andreessen House here. Right down on the same block on Jefferson is our Judge Ryan House. So we took a look at the context, took a look at the neighborhood, and found some inspirations. If you're talking about an institutional building, well, we have one in the neighborhood. We've got the Carnegie Center, the old Carnegie Library. That's an institutional use. We felt that it was a strong, proud building and something that we could learn from. We have the Ermatinger House, also on an institutional site with clean, classic proportions. Now, I know that this was moved to this location, but it was a member of the district. It was just moved within the district itself and is still considered to be a contributing building to the district, as is the library, as is the Andreessen House, with its large porch and its lap siding. Those are the buildings that we're looking at in the immediate vicinity. And so back to the historic preservation strategy here. The goal is really almost like the medical dictum of first off, do no harm. Our goal is to not harm this building. The second strategy or goal in preservation is whatever you do, make sure it's reversible. If somebody down the road, if they're smarter and better than us and they find a better way, make sure that they can undo your work and do the work proper. So we've got both those in mind. We found a building that has complete Povey glass windows. There's no way to even go. Sometimes you'll cut down a window sill to make it an entry point. We didn't want to even lose one window. But we found this blank portion of the building here. It's got some indent decoration. And on the other side, on both floors, is a non-historic fireplace. That's not even a working fireplace. So we figured that's our entry point into the building. We create a breezeway that's as narrow as we can get it, and it stands back 10 feet. It's inset off the street. This is our hyphen or our connector that the federal government would like to see. And this is our building design. I'm going to talk a little bit about how our design lays out and then the influences that cause this design to be what it is. So right here is our breezeway here. You know, Pete mentioned we're using fiber cement board there, and we're using it because that's the closest match and the quietest connection we can have to a church that's parch coated, that has a smooth cementitious space. So we want that to be very quiet. We've set it back. We put some windows in to kind of match some of the fenestration that we see in the church, and it's there just to connect and be quiet. And then we've got our transition zone. This is the main entry into this portion, into this wing. And so, as Pete mentioned, we've got stairs that come out in the same manner that the stairs do for the church. I'll show you a 3D that shows that a little bit more. And then in a more modern way, but highlighting and celebrating the entry point into the building, much like the church does in their own way. We tried to keep the windows within the massing of the space so that they weren't necessarily sprinkled all out, but they were pretty much contained by the nice solid masonry. And the masonry we chose is brick. Brick because we thought it was a nice color and material transition, and also we have brick across the street with Carnegie, and we thought it would make this a better neighbor to that building. And mentioning that we have a long building, we decided to kind of create two distinct massing groupings. We've got the transition zone, and then we've got the classroom wing. The classroom wing changes materials to the lap siding with two exposures. It's got some detailing on the cornice level. We've got the articulation in and out and up and down that the municipal code wants to see. It turns the corner on Jefferson. We needed another entry on Jefferson because we wanted this building to be neighborhood friendly. It also allows us to have an entry that's specific for the Oregon City Preschool and their needs. We've created a little porch that allows kids to wait for rides. And we felt that this size, scale, and look is appropriate to the neighborhood. And so here's some more specifics about our 6th Street. I mentioned that the transition zone really is more of the church, and so the coloring, the material use, and even how that fenestration is more long and it's just more of a punch fenestration that you see in the church is more of the church in that respectful manner that the guidelines wanted to see. And then the classroom wing, as it extends eastward, is more of the neighborhood, and so we start to look around the neighborhood for those sort of inspirations. I mentioned we look at the Carnegie Center not only for its masonry material, but how it handles and has strong corners and an inset with windows and that cornice line above it. In our own modest way, we're finding inspiration in the brick use and also in this building too, because this really is part and parcel similar to the library in its use, classroom library. The fiber cement board was something that was mentioned originally on the east elevation. I'll go back here. We had more of the fiber panel here, trying to kind of recall some of the use of the panel board on the 6th Street side. It wasn't well received. We decided to take it off. We went with the composite siding. Now, both these materials, brick and composite siding, are acceptable materials by the city based on these code areas. And the composite siding, even in the guidelines, it says that wood siding or materials which have the appearance of horizontal wood siding are acceptable. So we feel pretty good about the materials that we've settled on now. The east elevation, bring the scale down is the goal. Make this amenable not only to the neighborhood, but to the little preschool kids that will be coming and going from here. We like that welcoming porch that we found inspiration in the Andreessen House. We liked again, kind of the clean design and somewhat symmetry, but somewhat asymmetry. The Ermatinger House, you can see that the door is offset. We've kind of done the same thing and offset our door and had a little waiting area up to the side, which the architect on this building did as well. And then the overall goal, even with our own building on the site, the parsonage, we wanted to make sure that we were massed properly, correctly, and that it wasn't going to overpower this building on the side as well. Still has that sort of rhythm of building, space between building and building. And you can even see that, to the best of our ability, we tried to keep that Povey stained glass window available and visible through this corridor. We've got the south elevation as we turn the corner and go inboard to the side. This is the cutout, basically, the parsonage. So the lap siding comes around, and then we have that interior entry into the transition zone. And then with your back against the church, this is that west elevation. You see the brick on this side, and actually we transition to the lap siding on this side as well. So this is the view in our 3D model. Church, transition zone, education wing. And this was important to us as well. We want to make sure that our building stood back as you look down 6th Street, but also comes forward with this entry point. It's not as elaborate as the original, as the landmark, but it makes its own statement as well. Turn the corner. This is a key view as well. We wanted to make sure our building had some personality on this corner. Here's the porch, and then that view that I showed you just earlier. And also, it's important to note that this is how we work to create that. We not only wanted to create a view corridor to the window and a daylight corridor through the window, but begin to create nice spaces in the back here. So we've got a little hardscape plaza. We have the ability to do a labyrinth here, and then our 2 ADA spots, which makes really easy, quick, accessible entry into the building. I think that's my last image. So we'd be happy to entertain any questions if you have them.
All right, thank you. Any questions of the applicant at this time? Anyone? No?
I don't know if you need to see the materials or not, but we have little display boards. We can maybe just hold them up real quick.
Sure.
This is that fiber site, which is very substantial. And this is not the sort of stuff that you get at the Home Depot, which is about not even quite a half inch, probably 5/16 inch. This is about a full 5/8 inch thickness. It comes in different exposures. This is the 4-inch exposure that you can see on the pop outs. I think it's a beautiful material in its durability and the fact that you get great shadow lines on it. It's improved acceptable material. This is how we want to use it on it.
All right, we have no further questions on that. We'll open this up for public comment. Commissioner Juan, I'll let you call if you wouldn't mind. Typically, we would call for those agreeing with this application, then those neither or for, and then those against. But since we don't know off these cards who's who, we're just going to start calling as you came in. So I'll let Commissioner Juan draw those names.
Okay, and then so please speak into the microphone, state your name and address. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. And what's that? Okay, first person, Alice Erickson.
Thank you. My name is Alice Erickson, and I am the moderator of the Board of Trustees for Atkinson Memorial Church. I live in Molalla, and like many of our parishioners, we don't live in Oregon City, but we want you to know how much we do participate in and care about things that happen in Oregon City. Once a month, for example, we take a collection for the Hope Food Pantry, and we have been told that we are definitely one of the largest donors of all the other congregations in the city. We also, 4 times a year, take up a collection, too, for OSER, which is Oregon City Congregations Relief Fund. And we also host daily Alcoholics Anonymous in our church. Now, we have heard that there are folks that are concerned that we would be moving the Alcoholics Anonymous meetings over to the new building. I'm not sure why that's a concern, or if it is, it's just one of those rumors that's out there. But at the moment, there is no plan to do that. They are very happy with the space that they have in our Martha White room, which is in the lower level of the building, and so there's no plans to move that. We're still going to be using some of our spaces that we currently have existing in our basement. The only thing about our basement that is not good is the fact that we hold our religious education classes there, and that's why we're building our new building. One other point that I would like to make, and that has to do with growth rate of the church. If you've read some things, we in all of our projections, and of course as the Board of Trustees, we do these kind of projections of growth, we anticipate a 4% growth rate. Well, what does that really mean in terms of numbers? We have a membership right now of 195. 4% of that's about 8 people a year. So we don't anticipate becoming a mega church in the near future, that's for sure. And we don't think that our new building is going to impact that projection. So we just wanted you to know a little bit about us as a church, how we fit into the community of Oregon City, and how we feel that the space is needed, and how growth is anticipated. So that's what I wanted to add.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, next name, I hope I get this. Eddie Schiefel? Sorry.
I'm Eddie Schiefel, resident of Oregon City. I'm a member of AMC. I'm on the building committee. So for the last 2 years, I've been involved in the process of fundraising, specification, and design. And by the way, I want to speak to the standards part of it and appropriateness for the neighborhood and community of the church, is the specific piece I'm addressing. We've taken the process to heart and attempted to understand and follow both the letter and the spirit of your planning and your historic review process. We've chosen a highly regarded professional, statewide recognized professional to help us comply with, and by the way, a little expensive, regulations. So we've received a significant amount of both member and community input and incorporated that into the design. And I'd have to say, a lot of the input we get is contradictory. I mean, there's an awful lot of subjective stuff in these things that we're assessing, especially when we start applying, these standards. Many of the elements of the standards are subjective. Where they're objective, we've complied with them explicitly everywhere we've been able to. We have, literally to the letter complied. Asking you to please apply the standards responsibly and professionally, and approve the design as submitted. Thanks.
Okay, Sid.
Next is Cynthia Toll.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Cole, and I live in Oregon City. I'm a board member of the HRB. I'm before you tonight because my concern for the McLaughlin Historic District is paramount. As a consequence of my speaking here tonight, I will be forfeiting my HRB vote on the redesign of this architecture. My comments deal specifically with general compatibility, exterior design, detail, texture, and materials. The record reflects this design meets the SHPO and National Historic Guidelines for new buildings in historic areas. However, ORS 358.653 says SHPO is available for advice and assistance as needed, but generally prefers to honor the local process whenever circumstances permit. Therefore, guidelines for new construction in Oregon City Historic Districts dated September 2006 should be considered here. Specifically, pages 7 and 8, General Design Principles. Control must be maintained over the visual form and character of the construction to preserve the historic context, reflect historically appropriate materials, and reflect respective finishes. The fire station and the church both have stucco siding. Why can't stucco be used? Use of other styles dilutes and distracts from the historic context of this district, unquote. The architectural goal here is to combine the Carnegie style and the Ermatinger House style into the siding and form of this building. However, doing that creates no historical context, as the Carnegie building is not an indigenous style to this district. All Carnegie buildings are built the same, no matter where they're put. Design composition details. Page 50. Commercial buildings that are void of detail express modern products, detailing and finishes, or are brutalistic in nature are not allowed. Notice the stark plainness of this addition, with its sharp corners and uninteresting entryway and roof line. I'm speaking about the Jefferson entryway. Notice the view homeowners on Jefferson Street have from their front door. It also states, the guidelines also state that they want new construction to utilize detailing in a consistent manner throughout the design and in such a way that is historically appropriate. Traditional buildings develop detail by the use of available products, but they don't mean 3 different sidings on one building. Slightly raised parapets on selected corners of the roof to mimic the fire station structure would be highly appropriate in this case. That's just a personal opinion. Page 63 addresses windows, and here I feel that the window detail is the most troublesome of this design. At the very least, these should appear as 1/1 double-hung windows in order to harmonize with the neighborhood windows. Finally, the Atkinson Memorial Church sits in the heart of the McLaughlin Historic District. We should not consider this design or the design of this new building lightly, because any decision made by the city will set precedent over the entire district. And more infill is definitely coming. And that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Libby.
Thank you.
For your documentation of the record is Exhibit 4.
Okay, next is Dean DeSantis.
Good evening. Again, my name is Dean DeSantis, and I live in Oregon City. and I'm a member of Atkinson Memorial Church. And I'm in support of the applicant's plan, and I urge you to support it as well. I would like to speak specifically, though, to policy 5.3.1, architectural design of new structures in local historic districts to be compatible with the historic character of the surrounding area. As we all know, Atkinson Memorial Church is an iconic historic building within the historic McLaughlin neighborhood. As a member of Atkinson Memorial Church for the last 9 years, I can tell you that its history, its architecture, and its place in the community is a source of great pride for our congregation. So when we began discussions of a possible addition several years ago, the compatibility with and the integrity of the historic building and its neighborhood was a driving factor in selecting the architect with whom we would collaborate on the design. We initially began working with the architect William Hawkins III, a well-known historic preservation expert in the Portland area. Mr. Hawkins was nearing retirement and eventually elected to step aside and back from the project. At this point, we brought on Mr. Paul Falsetto of Carlton Hart Architects. I'd like to read you a little bit of Paul's background in historic preservation and architecture. Mr. Falsetto is a project manager and preservation specialist for Carlton Hart. Paul has worked on or assessed over 50 historic structures in his 15-year career. His most recent projects with Carlton Hart include rehabilitation of the Ladd Carriage House, the Clifford Apartments, and the Chaucer Court Apartments, all of which are listed in the the National Register. Paul received his Masters of Architecture and Masters of Science in Historic Preservation from the University of Oregon, and is an adjunct instructor at the U of O in both disciplines. Subjects that he teaches are preservation theory and eco-preservation. Paul serves as a director for the Historic Preservation League of Oregon and as an advisor for the Bosco Milligan Foundation. He is the chair, the national chair, of the American Institute of Architects Historic Resources Committee, and a member of the Mayor's Stakeholder Advisory Committee for the Rose Quarter redevelopment. Commissioners, we at Atkinson Memorial Church have great respect and love for this historic building in this historic neighborhood, and we have invested in the finest architectural experts to ensure we have a design and a finished building that not only is compatible with the historic district of the existing church and the surrounding area, but one that adds value both monetarily and socially to the neighborhood and to Oregon City. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Next is Kimberly Walsh.
Good evening, Planning Commission members. My name is Kimberly Walsh and I live in Oregon City. I am both a neighbor and an employee of Atkinson Memorial Church. I'm here today to urge you to approve the applicant's plan. There are a couple key points I would like to make in support of the church's application. First, in regards to criteria 17.56.010 conditional uses, I feel that the site is suitable for the new education building, will not impact parking or traffic in the area, nor will alter the character of the surrounding area. The area around Atkinson Memorial Church is unique in that it incorporates residential, business, and public uses. This church, which already facilitates education classes on Sundays and hosts the Oregon City Preschool, is not planning on adding new programs. They simply want quality space to do what they are already doing. Therefore, in terms of function, traffic, and parking, there is expected to be no significant changes related to the new facility. Unlike so many other churches in the McLaughlin neighborhood, Atkinson is fortunate to have use of not only the parking lot behind the church, but also an abundance of on-street parking, which is not in front of houses. The only time that I have seen a substantial traffic or parking issue is during the summer concerts in Library Park. At other times, parking is readily available along 6th Street in front of the church and along Library Park, and traffic is minimal to moderate. Secondly, in regards to Section 2, land use, Goal 2.4, 2.4.2, and 2.4.5, I feel that the church adds to the livability of the neighborhood. The historic church is a beacon and landmark in our neighborhood. The new addition will not take away from this, but rather will add to it. The new addition was designed in such a way as to blend into the background and not compete with the unique architecture of the church. By designing an addition in a manner which does not try to mimic the church, to a scale which fits the neighborhood, and having a setback variance, the addition will have the least impact to the neighborhood. Policy 2.4.2 states, strive to establish facilities and land uses in every neighborhood that help give a vibrancy, a sense of place, and a feeling of uniqueness, such as activity centers and point of interest. The church currently is a point of interest and an activity center. The church hosts the Oregon City Preschool, provides a place for other community activities such as AA meetings and weddings. The new addition will help them continue to be a vibrant activity center in our neighborhood by allowing them to have better quality classrooms and be ADA compliant. Members of Atkinson Memorial Church live in Oregon City as well as the surrounding areas. Therefore, the church does provide a place and identity for residents and visitors. The church brings people into our community who are likely to spend money at local businesses. Economic stability is important to our community in order to maintain a sense of place and vibrancy. For these reasons, as well as many stated in the staff report and by others who have spoken tonight, I ask you to support the church's application. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Next is Mick Montlock.
My name is Mick Mortlock, and I serve Atkinson Memorial Church as its Director of Community Outreach. Since 1844, Atkinson Memorial Church in its various locations and namesakes has been an exemplar of Policy 2.4.2, strive to establish facilities and land uses in every neighborhood that help give vibrancy, a sense of place, and a feeling of uniqueness. This was true in 1854 when the riverboat Gazelle exploded near Kenema, killing 25 citizens and wounding another 25. Our people provided first aid, conducted funerals, and comforted grieving families. It was true again in the 1930s when we stepped in and provided space for the 3rd and 4th grades while Barclay School was being rebuilt. We still occasionally run into senior citizens who remember their high school graduation being held in Atkinson Memorial Church. Now that's an example of vibrancy and sense of place. We are here a resource for Oregon City since 1844, the year the city itself was founded. We've been playing a positive role in the neighborhood, helping to turn alcoholics into healthier citizens, and providing a safe place for those who feel disenfranchised by gender discrimination. We are the kind of community citizen that can temporarily house the police force in an earthquake. According to Chief Conrad, their current facility is seismically substandard. If our city judges sentence more drug and alcohol abusers to attend our church's AA meetings, we are a reliable, capable host, and we have always responded positively to the community. We ask that you approve our application to enable us to do this better and easier than we can now do in our current constrained space.
Next is Chuck Scott.
Chuck Scott, 7121010 South Ferris Road, Oregon City. Longtime member of Atkinson, and I encourage the Planning Commission to approve the church's application for a conditional use. And one of the hats I wear at the church, I deal with insurance issues, and our insurance agent would really wants to see an elevator in the church. Temporary facility we have with one of these chairs that moves up a set of stairs is not efficient, safe, or very practical. So it's strongly encouraged that we become more handicap accessible. When I was moderator, as Alice is now, was back in late 90s. Bill Hawkins was hired at that time, to begin looking at a feasibility study for an addition somewhat similar to the one we proposed. So it's something we've been working on for over 10 years now. So I would like to recommend approval of the application.
Yes, sir.
Eileen Schneeler.
So I'm having you do it.
Hi, I'm Eileen Schneller, and I live in Oregon City, and I'm a member of AMC. And I have taught at the preschool on Sundays for the last few years, and as a part of the religious education team, we had a wish list, and this new building has almost everything on that wish list in it, and it would be so nice if we approved it and we could move into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie.
By the way, this name right here is many easier. If I say it, you can't spell it. If I spell it, you can't say it. Kelly Sutton? Sutton. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kelly Sitton. I'm a resident of Milwaukee, but I'm also a teacher at Oregon City Preschool and have been for the last 10 years. Our school's been housed at 718 6th Street for the last 49 years. We've been in business in Oregon City since 1946, so we've been a long member of this community. The Atkinson has provided us with low rent. We are a nonprofit preschool. We are a cooperative preschool. We happen to be the only cooperative preschool left in Oregon City, which means that our parents pay a very reduced rate of tuition. And without help from low rent and stuff, we wouldn't be able to offer that to our low-income and working-class families. Traffic, I can guarantee, will not change as far as our preschool is concerned. We don't have any interest in growing our program. Right now it's at its maximum, and I'd like to keep it that way. We're a small family-oriented school. Right now, I know parking has kind of been, I've heard, an issue. But our parents who are co-oping or staying at the school for the day with the children, I have 3 parent helpers every day, they park on Jefferson Street anyway because we have a 2-hour maximum parking on 6th Street, so they get tickets if they park there while they stay at the school. Otherwise, it's just dropping off kids and coming back out, which is about 5 minutes. And they sign in and out. So we run school from 8:30 to 2:15. We have 2 different sessions Monday through Thursday, so we'll have a maximum of 18 students in each of those sessions. And we can't expand when we get into the brand new building of the church because of square footage laws. We have to have X number of square feet filed, and so the new size doesn't allow us to change that. Things that the new space will allow us, though, we're not going to have to worry about lead-based paint, so we don't have to keep painting every little scrape off of our walls. We don't have to worry about our plumbing. We will be ADA compliant. I haven't been able to have OPP kids, which is the Oregon Preschool Program, the offshoot of Head Start. We basically used to do overflow Head Start. We haven't been able to do that because we're not ADA compliant anymore. Or that's one of the laws we set for us. So in the new building, we would be able to do OPP work again. It would be great to have multiple bathrooms for our children. If you've ever been around preschoolers and all 6 of them or 7 of them have to go at one time, it's not a fun experience when you're cleaning up the puddle on the floor. So there's just a lot of really nice little touches that the new building would add for our school. And parents are very worried about lead-based paint, lead pipes, that kind of stuff. And so getting out of our current building and into a new building would definitely alleviate that.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
All right, Pat Larkin.
My name is Pat Larkin. I live in Oregon City within a mile of the church. I'm both a proud member of Atkinson Memorial Church and I'm also the office administrator. I urge you to approve the applicant's plan. I will speak to policy 2.4.2 and some of the ways in which Atkinson Memorial Church benefits this community and our neighborhood. Atkinson participates in the Oregon City Congregation's Emergency Relief Fund. We are a substantial monetary donor to the fund. 4 times a year, we give them all the cash in our collection plate. And we offer referral forms that people in need can use to receive lodging, a hot meal, groceries, or gasoline. I hear firsthand the stories of people who are homeless, in domestic violence situations, who are hungry, and otherwise in need of assistance. I'm sure you can imagine the gratitude of these people. They are expressed sometimes with tears or with hugs, and I receive these on behalf of my congregation. Every month, our congregation donates money to the Hope Food Pantry. We also have a food barrel in the room adjacent to our sanctuary. Throughout the year, members contribute canned goods and other non-perishable items, which also go to the pantry. Each fall, we gather school supplies for low-income students in Oregon City, and in the winter, we collect warm clothing and blankets, which are distributed locally. And for several years, we've been involved with Clackamas County's Independent Living Program for youth aging out of foster care. Our members have offered classes in life skills, such as nutritional cooking and how to balance a checkbook and a budget, as well as giving high school graduation gifts and Christmas gifts for youth who do not have parents to recognize these important events. Atkinson offers community meeting space at low or sometimes no charge. Some of the groups and events that have occurred there include Clackamas County Homeless Count, PFLAG, a choir of seniors, Planned Parenthood, CPR classes, Habitat for Humanity, Wally's Music Concerts, the Alternative Prom, Rural Organizing Project, Oregon City Heritage Coordinating Committee, Citizens for a Safer Oregon City, Rainwater Harvest Seminars, Keep Our Library Open, and a girls group hosted by Clackamas Women's Services for girls who've experienced abuse. I believe that one of Atkinson's most important contributions to our community is our long-standing relationship with Alcoholics Anonymous, the group that meets at our church. We host 7 different subsets of the group, one each night of the week. A friend who attends the meetings tells me that she frequently hears someone say, "I got sober at the Pink Church." She says, the Pink Church saves lives. In addition to the regular nightly meeting, we also open our doors to AA every Thanksgiving and Christmas for the dinners they host, because those are the days of the year when this population is especially vulnerable and needs a place to belong. One of the reasons I choose to be a member of my congregation is because of the substantial and very real difference Atkinson makes in the lives of people, both here in Oregon City and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mary Johnson.
Good evening. I'm Mary Johnson. I'm a land use attorney. My office is at 500 Abernathy Road, Oregon City. I've requested 15 minutes because I have 17 exhibits that I want to introduce, and I have a number of comments on criteria.
I'll leave it up to you, gentlemen, and how many more do we have? How many more speakers do we have?
Because I'm obligated to raise issues with specificity. If I don't have the time, I can't raise the issues.
Sure, I understand.
5 others.
I'm open to that. Hearing the comments.
Excuse me, Ms. Johnson can raise her comments in writing as well. My only concern would be to give people equal time.
Yeah. But the public participation is very important. It's very important for these people that are here tonight to hear this as well.
Sure, I understand. I like, as many people we've had speaking, I generally give them as much time as you need. If it goes beyond, generally we offer 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes for neighborhood associations because they represent a large group. Again, I appreciate your interest in getting this on the record. I'm fine with it. I think we've got time to do that. We have a very few left to discuss that, and if there's anybody out there who would like to speak further on their particular issue, we will certainly listen to that as well. I do want to cap it as close to that 15 minutes as possible for you as well as anybody else who would like to pursue that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here representing Margaret Foss tonight. She is an owner of a historic house on Jefferson, right across the street from the site. As my comments will reflect, I will need to ask that this hearing be continued tonight. One, for the HRB approval. That is a requirement before an application can be decided by you. We do not have an HRB approval because Ms. Foss's appeal of the HRB approval was remanded back to the HRB, and that hearing is set for tomorrow night. So, of course, you won't be able to consider those conditions that they may set, and it may conflict with the conditions you set to this application. Also, other reasons for continuing the hearing would be to allow for transportation impact analysis on parking, and also to have the community development director hire at the applicant's cost a historic preservation expert who can comment on the design and materials that are used. And I would suggest Dr. Winston Heath at the University of Oregon. I have, in the month that we've had notice, communicated with him. He is the expert on historic preservation in the state, and he's unable to attend tonight because he's in Washington, D.C. on a historic preservation project, and he has been in California in recent weeks on historic preservation work that he does. And I would urge the Commission not to hurry tonight. The staff is really pushing you to hurry up and make a decision, warning you about the 120-day application period. If the applicant won't extend that for the time that's necessary to make a learned decision and one that will preserve the historic neighborhood, then there's plenty of reason to deny the application. The staff stated that the remand to the Historic Review Board was too narrowly. I was the attorney representing the appellant in that matter. The appeal was regarding the compatibility of the design and the materials to the historic values, both with the building itself and with the district. The church is a highly recognized landmark. It is a 1925 Gothic Revival church. It's right in the heart of the Historic Review District, so this is probably the most important, biggest deal that you guys are going to be looking at in your tenure on this commission. And so we need to carefully look at what we're supposed to do, not be so excited about having a big development happen in Oregon City that we lose sight of why we're here and what our job is as the land use guardians of the city. First of all, I'd like to address the noncompliance with development standards number 3 and 21 regarding complementary building structure and preferred building materials. Section 3A, and I quote, requires additions shall utilize materials and a design that incorporates the architecture of the subject building. This is shall. This is a Gothic Revival church. There is nothing Gothic about the proposed addition. The proposed addition is a modern industrial building with a strong horizontal line, which is in direct contrast and incompatible with the Gothic Revival style, which features arched windows, arched doorways, and a strong vertical line. The applicant has an opportunity with the elevator to really have a nice, strong vertical line there, and could design that to replace the second tower that was on the building when it was built, that was removed in 1957. But they didn't even do their homework to go back and see that that was what was there and how they could bring that to bear. The applicant has taken the idea of the differentiation component of compatibility to give it license to do something so totally distant from what the building is and what the historic distance is, and then call it compatible because you got to differentiate it. And I would like to draw your attention to Exhibit 401, which is the interpretation of the National Park Service Department of Interior Technical Preservation Services regarding the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, and it very carefully defines what compatibility means, and it gives pictures that shows that the compatibility, including the differentiation, is you have to be able to differentiate the addition from the historic structure. Of course that makes sense, but it has to go with it. And you can see in the recommended and non-recommended pictures in 401 what the Secretary of Interior is really getting at. And if you look at Exhibit 402, 402 is a picture of a Gothic revival church, a similar vintage as this one, and you can see to the right the addition. The addition is at smaller scale, it's at the rear, but it has a complementary roof line, it has arched windows, and it is set back. We have no problem with the scaling or the setting of the church. We just have a problem with the design, which is so different that it sets your teeth on edge. And the materials, which you can see here that the materials are quite compatible. It's the same color, same kind of brick, and the white interior and the recessed windows, all of which are hallmark of Gothic architecture. 403 shows an addition to a church. You can see the compatibility in the building materials, both in the brick and in the roof, colors and lines and materials. 404, you can see the addition, which is on the left. It complements the main historic building. There's an interpretation of some of the design features, but they're there, and it goes with it. 405, the portion of the building on the right is the addition. And what they did there is they used stucco and scored it to complement the limestone in the original building so that it looks like it carries the design, and it carries the color, and it carries the materials. Number 406 is another addition onto a historic inn. See a comment there. Number 407 is an addition on the left to a small Gothic church on the right. See the roof line is compatible. The windows are arched. They're set back in. Number 408 is St. Joseph Landmark Commission Editions publication. This is out of Missouri. But the reason I brought this to you is the picture on the first page at the top is a bank building that was attached to the historic building. But still you can see that there's compatibility there. The same as with the garage attached to the house below that. And then in 409 is a house in the McLaughlin neighborhood at 514 Jefferson. And you can see this house has been added onto 2 times. So you can see how the exterior finish is the same kind of siding, and the roof lines are similar materials. And you can see what was the original house, and you can see that the additions were done at different times, but it all goes together, and that's in our historic neighborhood. 410 is the Ernestinger house, and you can see, and it's kind of funny here, the addition, there must have been another porch on this side of the house. You see a door on the second floor that opens out into nothing, but still, between the basic house and the addition, you can see that the siding is that board and batten siding, and this addition here on the back is to the rear. It doesn't detract from the street scene of the Ernestinger house. And the windows are 6/6 panes, both in the addition and in the original house. Number 411 is the H.C. Mercedes house. This is a craftsman style house, and you can see the addition on the back is similar. It has similar lines, similar windows, similar roof line. It does not detract from it, and it has compatibility with it. And also on most of these, I put the Historic Research Survey form on the back so you can see how they were evaluated. Exhibit 412 is an example of a bad addition in the historic neighborhood that was added before the current ordinances were put into place. This is the Zion Lutheran Church. It is also Gothic Revival Church. This one's on Jefferson Street. You can see the addition is out close to the road, and it has a flat roof and flat-topped windows, and it does not go with the Gothic Church. And I would submit to you that if you approve the proposal in front of you, this is the kind of stark contrast that is going to go with the church that you're going to produce. Exhibit 413 is the addition onto the Carnegie Center, which is at the rear. And as you can see, it mimics the main building. It's not necessary that it mimic it, it just has to be compatible. Exhibit 414 is the fire station, and it's stucco, and there isn't any reason why the current edition can't have that similar stucco and similar color. Exhibit 415 shows this is the basic features of Gothic Revival style. These are things that can be used and interpreted in this particular proposal. 416 is the National Register of Historic Places inventory for the Atkinson Church. It has all the information about the design, the materials, and the history. That is a wonderful reference that should help you decide what you want to do. And 417 is the Historic Resource Survey form for the church. I would submit that the materials and design characteristics of the proposal are not consistent with the design materials, exterior materials on the church. The brick veneer, the lap siding, and panel board are not in kind or compatible with the church's materials. And the Community Development Director has not made the required finding in 3A that in-kind materials cannot be used, and they certainly can be used and should be used. And the Community Development Director has not requested advisory opinions of appropriate experts, and I would submit to you that the architect for the applicant has totally missed the boat on this one, and that expert opinion would be beneficial. So I would propose that we continue the hearing and require the Community Development Director to obtain an advisory opinion and reopen the hearing at a later date for further testimony after the report can be reviewed so that appropriate conditions can be formulated. The other alternative would be to deny the application for failure to comply with the end-forward criteria. Second main area for objections that Ms. Foss has is objections to the conditional use. Sub 3 requires that the development be timely, and that 1762-0508-7 requires parking be addressed. And it's obvious here when you're increasing the floor space by 80% that translates into a significant change of traffic impact. And we had testimony from a member of the church earlier tonight that they're projecting a 4% growth rate. And I did a little math while I was sitting here listening. If you have 32 students in the daycare center, in the preschool, that's 64 trips. Then you have the staff in the daycare center, plus deliveries, plus the church uses, plus a daily AA meeting, plus other community groups. I would say that the amount of vehicle trips reported was well underrated, that you've got now about 100 vehicle trips a day. And with a 4% growth rate, in 25 years, the traffic impact will be double. That's significant. the conditions have to address the full impact of the proposed use forever. So the current use plus the foreseeable future use. And in order to, the consultant that the city hired initially said, yeah, we need a traffic impact study until the applicant worked on it. And then he said, well, maybe we don't. We could condition the approval on yearly reports, and if the use goes up, then we'll require a traffic impact study. Well, let's just get it done now. Let's figure out what the number of vehicle trips there are now and what is going to be projected in the transportation manuals, and let's figure out what kind of parking we're going to need. The only parking that this development is proposing is two ADA spaces, period. Now, lip service is given to the fact that there's a small city lot next door, but there is no evidence that the church has a right to use that lot. Shared parking, or to what extent they can do it, there's no lease, there's no shared parking agreement, and in the month of notice, since my office is very close, I've gone up during the day, at lunch, sometimes in the morning, and look, that city parking lot's already about 3/4 full. And on Sundays, the place is parked up for blocks. So I think that the traffic has to be evaluated.
Can you finish up here? Because you're over your...
Over my 15 minutes? Okay. My third area is landscaping. The landscape plan is modern. It's not compatible with the historic character. The tree ordinance requires the 8-inch diameter pink dogwood tree that complements the church be preserved. And the applicant stated they're not going to be able to preserve it. That needs to be preserved under our tree ordinance. Also, we need to have 15% landscaping on-site and street trees, or not bring street trees in. We need to follow the ordinance. There's also the screening of mechanical equipment. There's a utility box on Jefferson right across the street from my client's house. They're not proposing to screen it in any manner. It has to be screened. Staff has recommended that it be screened if it's practicable. And that's a real easy loophole to get around screening it. I would suggest that that utility box be moved to the interior of the site so that the historic homes on Jefferson, their views are not going to be negatively impacted, which discourages preservation of those homes if you take away their historic view. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Patrick Sweeney.
My name is Patrick Sweeney. I live at 801 5th Street, right on the corner of 5th and Jefferson, block from the site. I'm here to state my opinion of opposition to the condition use and site plan of the Atkinson Memorial Church in addition, and speak to a couple of concerns. First, the traffic concerns, and I would love to see more heavier research as to what kind of impact this is going to play on the immediate neighbors. As of now, most of the properties on Jefferson there, including my house, do not have off-street parking or on-street parking, so this directly affects us. So that's where we're going to park our cars. And then we also have other issues which I really haven't seen addressed. That would be, what's going to happen with the community center and the traffic that would be with whatever proposed thing gets put in there, whether it be business or temporary use of library plus the fire station. So these are concerns. Another thing I'm concerned about is the wear and tear of our streets, roads, sidewalks in the neighborhood. Right now I have right on the corner, and my sidewalk is cracked, chunked, and the roads there are getting really rough, and I don't know what kind of impact the new construction would have bringing in all those loads, hauling out for demolition, and then of course long-term traffic with 4% increase from what's figured now. No one knows, and I'd like to see a study on that. Another concern I have is flooding, which is a tremendous problem. If you live, some of you guys said you live pretty close. When we get heavy rains, Springer Hill Creek just kind of bottlenecks up and all our basements flood out. And so this brings a concern as to the church brought up that they also have flood concerns, that I wonder what kind of runoff problems in addition of a flat roof would cause. Would that back up our sewers more and cause additional flooding in our basements come rain season? Environmental impacts of this large addition and roof addition with water runoff demands. We have volatile organic compounds and other chemicals that come off of rooftops, and I wonder if there's any data and research as to the environmental impacts of this addition with water runoff to the streams, creeks, and of course river. And then lastly, I wanted to say that the city board kicked back to the historic review board because they said that it didn't fit the neighborhood and they needed to choose materials that were more fitting for the neighborhood. However, we're going to define that. I don't see the additional or the materials that are being used on this as being fitting both with the site of the church and the Gothic Revival architecture, and I don't see the materials even coming close to fitting with what houses are surrounding it, both with wood trim, double pane windows, etc. So I strongly urge that
Bob Foss.
My name is Bob Foss. I'm at 508 Jefferson Street, Oregon City. I have some concerns about parking, number one. They're already using the parking lot that is owned by the city, which is marked for senior center only. Violators will be towed. What's going to happen here, parking, I have off-street parking, on-street parking also is the only thing I have. And my concern is when they put the church in here, when they add on to the church and whatever events they have there and whatever's going to happen with the Carnegie Center, and if the Carnegie Center is going to use the city-owned parking lot, then where's everybody going to go? Okay. Another thing I have to say is about the alley. That alley is very heavily used. I live right across the street from it. I see it every day. You commented about putting a fence up there. I know that on our side of Jefferson Street, there's a very wide easement that the city has. There's a fairly narrow alleyway right there, and you have the carriage house right on one side of the street directly. That I think if you look at new construction has to be set back quite a bit from where the pavement is, because the alley easement is wider than what the pavement is. And there's, like I say, there's a lot of traffic right there, and there's a lot of people that cut the corners right there coming out of that alley. One of the things that was raised when we were at the city council meeting for this was that the area where this is at, that this is basically our living room, where the Carnegie Center is, the living room for Oregon City. And that one of the commissioners said that you really need to raise the bar a bit because of where it is, the location. I haven't seen where that was done at all. It was also commented, I think the words they used were materials native to the area when they showed the pictures of the porch on the Andreessen home. That was brought up, the materials, the basalt rock that was there, the panel work that was on the porch trim. And I just don't really see where it raises historic value at all to the neighborhood. I mean, I think you're going to see people coming into the Carnegie Center for summer concerts and going to go, wow, what happened over here? Okay, because this isn't helping Oregon City as far as the values of being historic.
Thank you.
Annie Scott.
My name is Annie Scott. I live in Lake Oswego, and I've been a full-time employee of Atkinson Memorial Church and a member since 2001 as the Director of Religious Education. A primary responsibility I have is for programming of children and youth. When I first arrived, I learned from congregants their desire to create better space for children and youth. We currently serve approximately 110 children and youth. And the spaces we have for Sunday school for them, as well as for adult space for meetings, are odd corners of an old building that was not designed for the way churches function in our modern world. One of our spaces is tucked behind the furnace room and the kitchen. One is part of the dining hall behind glass doors, and another is in the dining room behind a temporary divider. Adults have to walk through this room to get to restrooms, and the noise between the classrooms is always an issue. Since I first arrived at Atkinson, I have heard from adults of all ages and all stages in their lives their desire for spaces for our children and youth that speaks to our love and respect and care for them. When children were asked what they would like in the new building wing, one of them answered, "Classrooms, not corners." A primary motivator has been and continues to be quality spaces for the next generation, for the generation we currently are serving. We value our history and our future. And just as our congregational ancestors built the big pink building with future generations in mind, we too care about our children now and those who will come after we are gone, and want the space to reflect that care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greg Stoltz.
Hello, I'm Greg Stoltz. I live in Oregon City. I am a parent at the preschool. I am also currently the preschool board president. I'll be going to my second year as the president next year, and next year will be my fifth year as a parent in the preschool. And I also have another young child coming through, so I've been a participant in the school for quite a while. Furthermore, I actually attended the preschool long ago, so I have a history. I also grew up in the neighborhood. I grew up on 8th and Monroe in the historical registered Joseph Block House. My mother still lives there. I point this out because I think I do have a context and a respect for the neighborhood. I obviously live there, living in Oregon City now. I have a lot of respect for the historical nature of it. I also have a lot of nostalgic feelings toward the preschool. With that said, as a parent and a board member of the school, I've also been dealing with some of the challenges of us supporting that facility and having a school in that building. It's obviously been there a long time, but it's an old building, and it has some issues in terms of just maintenance and the layout of the building. It's not a particularly efficient building for moving kids around. A lot of the square footage is on multiple floors, so you're moving kids up and down into basement, and storage is all in the attic space, and these are very small stairwells, so it's difficult to move around. So the bottom line is, from just a functional perspective, I very much look forward to moving into this new building. I think it's going to serve the needs of the school significantly better than what we have now. Furthermore, I'd like to comment that working with the church has expressed a sincere desire to keep the school there, and they've been very supportive of us and then very positive in working with us and trying to stay in that location. The school has a great community benefit for Oregon City. It's, like Kelly said, the only cooperative preschool still in Oregon City, so very low tuition rates and great for families that want to be involved in the school. So I think it has a very positive community benefit, in addition, to all the other things that the church has already talked about doing. I'd like to talk just briefly about some of the things that have been mentioned earlier. In terms of the parking concerns, as Kelly said, there's going to be no planned growth of the preschool. We're limited still by the space even in the new building. as well as the fact that we only have one teacher, so we can't grow the school by any measurable amount right now. Our maximum class size is 18. It's going to stay at that number. Most of our classes are not fully populated with 18 students, so when you're looking at parking concerns, you're looking at transitional movement of 18, maximum. There's two classes, so that some of the numbers that are thrown out don't apply to how many cars are going to be there at any given moment. And again, these 18 cars are going to be coming and going over brief periods of time. The typical class, people that stay in the classroom, you're looking at the teacher as well as maybe 2 or 3 parent helpers, so maybe 4 cars that actually are on site for any length of time during the day. As somebody that's been there many times, during the school day and on the weekends, I've never seen a parking issue around there. There's no residential, parking issues across the street for where the Carnegie Center is. So 6th Street has never been an issue, and I've never seen any significant parking problems on Jefferson as well. Furthermore, I'd like to address the topic about the historical, distinction of the building, and I apologize, I realize I'm going over, but I think the precedent has been set that I could do that. Is that okay?
I'm not going to tell you no.
So I just, again, as somebody that's, grown up and lived in Oregon City in that neighborhood for a lot of my life, I look at that building, that church right now, it's an iconic building. It stands out. It's distinct architecturally. I'm no expert, but it doesn't, it does have a unique and unusual architecture, like was being described, very vertical. The addition, I don't believe should, try to mirror that. As described, it would detract, I think, from the distinction of that building. I think the church and the architect have really done a lot of diligence around creating a building, an addition that is functional, it's useful, it blends with the overall neighborhood, but it's not going to detract from the significance of that church building. And I think that, trying to change that addition to, more blend with the existing building would put you at risk of lessening the distinction of that, that tall Gothic type of architecture. So again, I support the addition, and I hope you will as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Last one, Anita Trudeau.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Anita Trudeau. I'm a resident of Oregon City and neighbor of Atkinson Memorial Church. I wish to express my support of the plan and design for the proposed building addition. I live within 2 blocks of the property, so I walk. Parking's not an issue for me. I think some not on my list here, but one of the points I didn't hear mentioned is that we're using this new space basically for classes and things that we're doing now. So we're really not, we're adding some square footage, but we're moving the children into that space, not adding children. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of additional parking needed. Anyway, we're proud to have incorporated progressive and healthy environmental concepts into our overall design, and while following all guidelines, aesthetics, and recommendations of the Historic Review Board and city planning codes and requirements. And because our church is used for meetings, weddings, etc., I'm particularly in support of the addition of the elevator to the building and the addition or repair of the ADA ramps on the sidewalk curves, which are also going to benefit not just our congregation and our members, but the entire neighborhood and pedestrians. And so I'm in support and urge you all to please approve this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? Denise McGriff, are you speaking on behalf of the Neighborhood Association? Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
I am here this evening on behalf of the Steering Committee for the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. We held a meeting on the 17th and reviewed the proposal again in some detail. And I apologize for the lateness of our submittal, but the meeting was necessary and we required a review. We submitted comments both on the Historic Review Board application, which are included, and also this particular application. I want to start out by saying that those of you that live in the neighborhood, as I do, in the McLaughlin neighborhood, that we are a neighborhood of churches. And we have many and now more institutional uses than we've ever had before, with City Hall moving back into the neighborhood after it had been gone for a while. Many of us have worked long and hard on the restoration of the Carnegie, the fire station, and other properties in our neighborhood. I do want you to know before I start my testimony on this issue that we did raise the issue of parking and traffic for the Carnegie. It was a Type 2 application. It did not go to a hearing, but there were some discrepancies in the applicant's submittal regarding parking for the Carnegie. And I know many of you have been to the concerts in the park, so you know that that's pretty transitionary. And on Thursdays, you can't find a place to park, miles from here, and people do come in early to get parking. It's not necessarily a problem, but I'm assuming if someone comes home during that concert and they want to park in front of their house, they're not going to be able to, but it does end. The whole issue of whether the application meets the criteria is going to fall into your laps. And I think that our review of this particular application, in terms of the condition use and site plan reviews, that we did find that based on the criteria that this application does meet the criteria as outlined in Chapter 17, Title 17, the Zoning Code. We don't think that there are any substantial impacts because the activities of the church already exist on the site, and there's no increase in the activities being proposed, as you've heard testified to tonight. And it's obvious that public facilities and services are available to the site, and the existing transportation facilities, which are the nearby streets, can adequately serve the site as it currently does today. The whole issue of whether or not the proposed use will alter the characteristics of the surrounding area in a manner which limits, impairs, or precludes the use of surrounding properties probably is a little more subjective than we probably like, but the church is currently there and has been there and probably has been there prior to many of those homes, and the Carnegie and the fire station all being there. But regardless of that, we basically felt that the proposed use is not going to substantially impact the neighborhood and is not really going to impact it at all, as again, as we stated, it's already there. The other issue of compatibility, and again, we can have dueling experts here, which we frequently do yet, but I think you'll find that question that Dan asked about the addition, and again, I think this was a difficult application for the staff because it's not only addition, but it's also new construction. So you're looking at sort of a hybrid of what we're trying to get at, and I think there's one school of philosophy that deals with in the Secretary of Interior Standards, it talks about, it's not really philosophy, it talks about making sure that proposed additions are designed to minimize the impact on the historic structure. And I really have to hand it to the architect because one of the concerns that we had earlier on about the other proposed design was that it substantially impacted the historic church. It kind of took out that whole back. And if you don't have those Povey windows there, which again are unique in this particular area. They're dime a dozen in Portland, but not so much in Oregon City. Those were important, and we had talked to him about making sure that those Povey windows remained intact. But I think it's our feeling, according to the standards, that this new work is clearly differentiated from the old and is compatible in its massing, its size, its scale, and its architectural features. I'm sure we can all tweak it a little bit, and I'm sure that the architect is continuing to tweak it. But I think that it really maintains the historic integrity of the Atkinson Church. The other thing that I always look at when looking at these sort of applications is, okay, if something happened to the addition, would the church still be intact? And according to the Secretary of Interior Standards, the new addition proposed is designed in a manner that, not that it would, but let's say for some reason it gets removed, the essential form and integrity of the Atkinson Memorial Church would not be impacted. And that's pretty important. I think that the way that it's designed to barely touch the church is pretty unique, and I think it's really a good idea. I had a chance to, over the weekend, review the staff report, and I believe that we would concur with the findings of staff and appreciate the fact that the staff did a very thorough and diligent job in looking at all the aspects. And you'll find in our submittal that of the thing that I thought we would actually have some disagreement about was not a disagreement, but that they were really concerned about the size of trees that would be adjacent to the building on the 6th Street side. They wanted to see those be a little bit larger to provide screening. And there wasn't an issue with the fact that they aren't adjacent to the street in the parking strip, primarily because, again, as was stated, there are some very large power lines there. And as you know, we have problems in the city right now with some of our trees impacting that. And we do need to make sure that they do not impact that. So I think the staff's recommendation to move the trees back on that elevation is really appropriate. And PGE will be a lot happier about it too. So they do come along frequently and do try to trim people's trees, and there's an issue. We also had a sketch that we attached that one of our steering committee members, who's an architect, and looked at the windows and had made some suggestions about how the windows could be a little more in keeping with the church. And he particularly pointed out the way the doors were, and he picked up a couple of design elements. We'll just submit that for your review, and we'd like to give that to the project architect and see what he thinks about that. But all in all, steering committee voted to recommend approval of this particular application, and we recommend to you that recommendation as well as the concurring with the staff report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for hearing our report.
Thank you. All right. Any questions? Okay. Anyone else like to speak at this time? Just come out to the table if you would. And if you would, reintroduce yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is still Mick Mortlock. I'm reacting to the remarks made by Mary Johnson. It feels to me like if we look at the building now, it was built 80-some years ago, and it's gorgeous. It's got these beautiful stained glass windows. It's got all this religious symbolism in it. But it was built by people who primarily identified themselves as Christians. I don't know if you know anything about Unitarian Universalists, but we don't mostly identify as Christians. We identify as humanists, pagans, theists, atheists, all sorts of people coming together to build a community together. And when I'm asked to design or move into a building that's got arched windows and arched doorways, essentially that we're there as part of the Gothic tradition and they're there because they point to heaven, I feel like my religious freedom is being violated. And I don't want, when I took my role as a member of the team that's putting together this new building, it was primarily because I wanted to create a space that fit our theology, not the theology of those who built the building 80 years ago. So that's really my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? All right. This time we'll have a rebuttal. Oh, sorry. We will need a form filled out, please, when you're done.
My name is Margaret Foss. When we first heard about this addition, my husband and I went over to the fire station to listen to this. We were kind of excited about what they were going to do. And once I saw the plans, I just about threw up dinner. We were told that, well, they could go 3 stories high. Well, frankly, I'd rather see them go 3 stories high in the footprint of the building that's there. A couple of the pictures that you see, you can't even see the beautiful foggy stained glass windows from the sidewalk. You can get one little view if you're on the sidewalk across the street down a very narrow way. That's all you see. They're worried about the lighting in the morning. Oh my gosh, nobody even shows up till 10 o'clock over there half the time. So the sun's up. I mean, why not build it 3 stories high? Build it 2 stories high and push it back. It takes up so much space in that lot. It's unbelievable. We were told that it wasn't just a preschool, it's daycare. That's how they're going to fund this. So you haven't even heard about that aspect yet. How much traffic is that going to be? I mean, this is what we've heard from the parishioners themselves. And yeah, we're concerned. There is no parking now. The city should lease them parking space. The city would do it for any other business because that's what this church is a business. You talk about weddings. Well, people pay for those weddings. They probably pay for the funerals, although I don't see very many people, dying to, go there to, have them perform the ceremony. Haven't seen that at all. I've lived across the street for 20 years, and we've never really had any interaction with the church. I got a flyer about a food drive, and that was within the last year. Why is the church so afraid that people in the neighborhood, no one knows about this? It's just around Jefferson Street. And maybe it doesn't impact them, but I would think that, this is historic Oregon City. That's why people want to buy homes here and fix these old homes up. If I tried to build an addition onto my home, what do you think would happen? I've talked to homeowners that have 18 months gone up to the Historic Review Board, month after month, and this has got a green light to go. And yes, it will impact our neighborhood. I was shushed at one of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association meetings because I said this is a horrible thing to do to this building. It looks like a shoebox that they're adding aspects to, different siding, and it's supposed to look like this porch, and it doesn't. What's the roofing material? Can you tell me what the roofing material is? Because that's a big concern. Is it asphalt? Is it rubber roofing? Do you see very many homes in the neighborhood that are like that? I realize this is mixed-use commercial, but I don't think they meant something like this. But will it just be preschool, or will it be daycare too? That's a big issue for us. I feel like saying, historic Oregon City, it's going to be history if this happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else like to speak? Okay. Now, it's all up for everybody.
Go ahead. To address some of these issues, call up my presentation again. The computer wake up here. Hopefully we can get it over here. There we go. Thanks. First things first, the roofing material is going to be a TPO, which is a standard commercial roofing material that's appropriate to a low-sloped roof like this. You don't tend to see the roof because of the high parapet walls, which is part of the design. I think it's appropriate, because history's been brought up, I think it's appropriate to share a little bit of history on this project. And I feel pretty honored to have a longer history than my direct involvement, because we had a chance to work with Bill Hawkins. And Bill worked, as was mentioned, in the late 90s, early 2000, did what was called programming. He worked with the church and figured out all their needs, came up with kind of more of a schematic concept, and then the church thought about it for 7 years. And then they came back to Bill in 2007 and said, all right, we're ready to get more serious with this. And at that time, Bill was semi-retired, and I had worked with Bill in the Ladd Carriage House. We actually hired him as our historic consultant. I have a ton of respect for Bill. I've worked with him on a number of committees and stakeholder groups. And we worked with Bill on this, and we had a quick turnaround time. We did the same thing. We talked to the church and said, what are your needs? And actually, that was one question I asked. I said, are you going to put a preschool in here? And they were very, very clear in 2007, no. Are you going to put a daycare there? And they said, no, this is preschool. Preschool only. There is no daycare. And, okay, so we wrote that down. We came up with the square footage they need, and Bill designed the building. That was his role on this. I was more the manager. Bill was the designer. And came up with a two-story building that affixed to the historic church in kind of a C configuration. So if this is the church, it added onto like that, created a little light well for the Povey stained glass window. We got a price, and it was shown to the neighborhood association. And the feedback we got was, it's too tall, it's too big, you're blocking too much of the window. Maybe you can use a little bit more of the site and spread some of that massing out on the site. We talked to the State Historic Preservation Office, and they said, we don't necessarily like new buildings to look like old buildings, and this will really fool the passerby. It'll even fool the more knowledgeable person. So actually, the church said, thank you very much, and thought about it for 2 years, and I had a chance to think about it for 2 years as well. They came back August 2009 and said, all right, we're ready to go. We want you to fine-tune your programming. We have a budget. Let's go. We need to get out of the ground this summer. So we set the task and came up with a new design, pretty much what you see here, talked with the neighborhood association, got their feedback. We went through these channels, quite frankly. We talked to the Historic Review Board and went through a design assist, showed them the early designs, and one of the things that they said, and this is one of the things that I had done, I'm going to try to find the right image here, go the right way, is in this location here, I put stucco on that. I said, you know what, that's the closest I can get to match the church, stucco. And the Historic Review Board said, we don't like it. We don't see stucco in the immediate neighborhood. It doesn't feel appropriate to us. And they're the ones that suggested brick. And they suggested brick because it was contextual. You saw it at the Carnegie across the street. And this was not a cheap ad. And so we said, okay, we'll go with brick. That was a direct comment. We heard it. We reacted to it. The rest of the design kind of followed suit with this back and forth. As I mentioned, we created the Hardy panels and we brought them to the Jefferson Street side. Didn't get good feedback on that. It was mentioned that the building looked too commercial. Well, this is an MUC district, but we're being sensitive and contextual, so we changed that elevation too. We made it more residential. I think it's a little bit disconcerting when a lawyer comes up and begins to throw everything in a very kind of a lawyerly way. I was expected to see a kitchen sink up here too. And it's disconcerting because Mary Johnson comes to the game very late. It's interesting because she mentioned that we don't know the building, we didn't know there was a tower there. Of course we knew there was a tower. In 2009 we did a complete condition assessment on the church itself. The church wanted to look at upgrading their building. We even looked at putting an elevator in the church. No way to do it. No way to do it. So we've done our due diligence over a period of time. At the Historic Review Board meeting, actually at the remand, let me back up, at the City Council meeting, which was eventually remanded, Mary Johnson, for the first time that I saw her, came and said pretty much, they're using the wrong criteria. They're using the criteria that this building is an addition. They shouldn't be using that. This building's a new construction. She hammered that, new construction. And indeed, when we talked with the planner, we said, it was Christina Arbson Gardner, and we said, is this new construction or addition, Christina? Because the building is about 30% larger than the building that it's adding to, and by municipal code, it needs to be considered as new construction. And she said, I want you to think about them both. But this was the most complete guidelines, titled Oregon City Historic District's Guidelines for New Construction. So tonight she comes and talks about additions. So there's been a little bit of a change of game here. And then the additions that I don't happen to be able to see, but the additions she shows are additions to small buildings, and they're one-bedroom additions, little bumps. They're not additions that are 30% of the floor plate of the building that it's added onto. So we need to use the right criteria here. And we were careful about using that right criteria and using it to the letter and spirit of that criteria. We've addressed it, I think, to satisfaction not only to the neighborhood association, And you've heard Denise McGriff come up. She's come up three times now and given testimony towards that end. We've talked with the State Historic Preservation Office. These are the folks that are charged to protect historic buildings, in particular the church. I talked with Joyce Sears on a number of occasions. She gave us her feedback. Our building reflects that feedback. We've made changes as needed, as required, in a collaborative sense. This building has evolved, and we're quite proud of it. And frankly, if there's an event at the Carnegie Center, and someone turns and looks at this new building, I hope what they say is, this is a growing, vital, vibrant district. This is a district that's able to take infill and not run from it. It's able to take infill in an appropriate way that adds to the quality and value of the district. That's what we're trying to do here. It was mentioned that maybe we need to have more experts look at the building. Well, that's fine. Kingston Heath was mentioned. He's the director of the Historic Preservation Program at the University of Oregon, from which I graduated. I've known Kingston for years. Kingston has hired me to teach his students that eco preservation class. Kingston wanted me to teach that. I taught that for him and for his program. Kingston wants me to continue to teach for his program. I don't think that Kingston would do that if he didn't think highly of at least my aptitude, if not my genuineness. I think it's probably time for me to kind of sum up a little bit, and I think the summation that I'd like to leave you with is that we're talking about long-time residents in the site, and I don't think that anybody in good faith could remand the folks that use the Oregon City Preschool can remand the church. These folks are doing good things and have done them for a long time. You've heard people come up and talk about that. They provide valued service to this neighborhood and will continue to do that. I think that, as I mentioned, the design reflects, addresses, and fulfills the requirements as set forth. It's been reviewed and approved by all the jurisdictions, including the Historic Review Board. A remand has been placed forth on siding. We've changed the siding. I'm confident that that's going to be approved tomorrow as well. And I think it's something that we're going to all be proud of in the near future, in the distant future. And again, I think it's something that I think fits Oregon City well. And I'm pleased and proud to be part of this process. So I thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
Yes. Any questions? You got them up here? No? All right. Thank you very much. Okay. At this point, we've got a request. So we need to...
We have a request for continuance. And based on one of the slides in the PowerPoint where we talked about the 120-day deadline, would we bring that up? Our next available... Okay. It will be June 14th, 2010, the next Planning Commission hearing, which the applicant should attend. And if there is any subsequent need to continue that hearing to the next Planning Commission hearing, we can do that at that time. Would be July 12th.
July 12th. Ms. Ricker, does that require us to keep this record open?
But we'll need to continue it to a date certain.
Okay. So I will, for discussion, would you like to discuss it more this evening, or would you like to move it forward to a date certain of the 14th of June for our decision?
Yeah, I'd like to continue it until June 14th.
Do we want to have any discussion about the proposal as it stands?
Certainly we could. I mean, it's really up to you all how you want to do that. We can do that now. The hearing will continue to be open. If we get, the concern I would have about that now is if we're going to get more information, with the hearing being open, we'll have additional information. We may make that moot point. So it'd be nice to be able to get all the information, the results of the HRB, etc., for us to discuss in full. be my thought.
So it'd be most appropriate to wait until all the information is.
We're going to keep the record open.
Yeah. I would think so, but if you have questions or issues you want to bring on to discuss at this point, too.
No. We're going to continue.
Well, who's new? He hasn't learned about this whole mic thing yet.
I would say if we're going to continue, we can wait until the continuation to have our discussion.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
For me, I'd like to wait. I'd like to get all the information and then have a discussion. I mean, there's probably some things we can talk about that probably will, but I'm kind of in the mind of just waiting and getting everything, and we can just address it all. I agree.
Okay. Do I have a motion to that? Then?
Move to continue hearing for this is
CU 10-01 and SP 10-01.
CU 10-01 and SP 10-01 until June 14th.
I'll second.
Date certain, I guess.
Okay. We have a motion to continue.
Commissioner Stein?
Aye.
Commissioner Lajoie?
Aye.
Commissioner Tidwell?
Aye.
Chair Powell?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So what that means, obviously, is we're going to continue this discussion on to the 14th of June. Everyone who's been here or involved or has spoken will be included in any further information, any new data. You'll be privy to that as well, so feel free. The hearing is still open. The public comment time is still open, so you do have an opportunity to present written materials if you love, or anything else at this point. So,
staff will be preparing an update memorandum a week prior to June 13th, and people can submit written comments to me before June 7th. That would be nice. I can put them in the staff report. If not, we'll just bring them to the planning commission the night of the hearing.
And we'd appreciate it, so we have a chance to read it all. Yeah. We get these late deals, and it's a little hard for us to gather that information. So we appreciate that very much. And Pete, is there anything else that you have for the body here?
Not at this time. We will prepare draft minutes of tonight's hearing and try to get that into the record as early as we can. Similarly, we'll be doing the same thing for the Historic Review Board remand tomorrow night.
Okay.
And posting it on the city website as soon as we can.
Very good. So on the city website is a great place to get this information. If you're not, if you don't access it, you should. It's an excellent site, and all the data is there, and they're pretty timely, so it'll be available. If there is no other business of the board,
there's not.
At this point, then we are adjourned. Thank you.